Hello, friends. Welcome back to another Mont Blanc Inspire Writing class. Really delighted to have you here for part 2 of our French cursive series. All right, our focus today is going to be on the beautiful capital letters. So let me go ahead and turn our attention to our handouts, and I will walk you through where we are going. I am going to be using mostly an extra fine nib today and a medium, but you guys can use whatever writing instrument you would like for this style. The writing instruments that we're going to be using for this style of calligraphy, you can use anything. In fact, later in the class, I will be using a ballpoint pen, primarily using the fountain pen. But if you have a broad edge pen, like a B or a double B, you can use that as well. So this is a very versatile style of writing that you guys can use. We're going to use that non-writing hand, and we're going to place it in the corner of our paper. And the reason for that is not just because it helps us move the paper as we're writing, which is one of its primary jobs, but it also helps us stabilize our body. So we're not putting all of our pressure on our writing hand, but rather having a more squared position to the writing surface and putting a little bit more of our weight on that non-writing hand allows us to, again, not fatigue our writing hand quite so much. Let's do a little bit of review and warm up just to get that ink on the page. And for those of you who did not join us for part 1, so you'll have that dark line and then it's broken up into 4 sections. This top line here, not really writing space. Now, sometimes we'll have a descender from a line up above that gets written in here, but this allows a little bit of white space between our lines of text. Our capitals today will be going up to that 3rd line, go all the way up to that 3rd line. And this proportion is going to be really, really helpful. Having these 3 lines is going to be fantastic as we are trying to train our eyes. Like, hey, how far down does that loop start? So if I'm doing the P, okay, it goes all the way down to that section, but the bowl is just in the upper 3rd. So having it broken apart is actually really beneficial. As far as the other proportions, we talked about most of our lowercase letters or the vowels are going to just be this 1 section high. And some of our capitals will go into the descender space, as we will see with like the letter J. So they'll go down 2 spaces below that dark line there. So that's our basic proportions. As far as slant, we talked about how our letters are going to be really upright. There are a few times with the capital letters, like the A here, for example, where it's a little bit trickier to get that, upright. If you don't have any of the letters or strokes of the letter that are really on that 90-degree slant, but rather slightly angled. So another example would be our X. So if none of our strokes are really on that 90 degree, how do we know if we're writing upright? The trick there is to think about if you were to cut the letter in half, does it look balanced and is it across that 90-degree axis? If not, then you might need to turn your paper a little bit. So if you find yourself writing with your paper turned really far to the side and you're trying to get that upright lettering, it's really tricky. You're going to naturally want to turn your letters. So the trick for me as a right-handed writer is I actually keep the paper pretty square in front of me. You might turn it slightly counterclockwise as a right-handed writer. And for left-handed writers, turn it slightly clockwise to help you get that straight line as we are writing. Okay. So we are still aiming for that 90-degree slant in our letters there. Okay. As far as warming up, and again, a quick note on the Sayez paper. This is our small guidelines, and you can write really, really small. This is with the extra fine nib, so I get like the beautiful detail in our letters here. Or you can kind of section that off and say that instead of just using, 1 square per section, I'm going to use every 2 lines would be a section. If you want to play with that. To me, it gets a little bit confusing to my eye if there are too many lines in there. So I would rather just print out the guidelines that are that match for the writing size that I'm going for. All right, for this section, I'm going to be using a medium nib so that you can see the letters a little bit better, but feel free to use whatever you like. And I'm going to be using the amethyst purple ink because it makes me happy. All right, as per usual, the way that I teach, I'm going to teach the letters in not alphabetical order, but grouped instead by familiar or similar strokes. And this first section, you're going to notice right away, they all have this fun little, for lack of a better word, a loop-de-doop top to it as how it starts. And they're also really straight, okay? You see this section of each one. It's got a really strong backbone to it. So for the letter I, and I've got the character on the side here, so if you're not sure what letter you're looking at here, there's a little hint there for you. For our letter I, we're going to start, we'll number these 1, 2, 3, 4 in these boxes. So we're going to start in box number 2 with a little turn up, a small little loop at the top. So that's the entry stroke, and then straight down on the 90 degrees with a gentle curve to the bottom. Okay? K is going to start exactly the same way. Same little loop, straight down on the slant, curved base. And then you'll see here in the second example, I've given you guys a number 1 to show you that's the first stroke, and then where number 2 starts. So number 2 is also going to be in section 2 with a curve. And if you were just kind of aim right in the middle of this stroke is where we're going to have that second little loop come down and around. Notice how thin this letter, at least this portion of the letter K is. It is a thin letter, and actually the H as well. That gap in between there is quite thin. Now the loops make it a little bit wider, but think about really compressing that space in there so it doesn't get too wide in your letters. H is a fun one. I really like the H and the K in this style of writing. So we're going to go start similarly, our little loop down along 90 degrees. And here, instead of just ending with a curved base, we're going to kind of aim for that middle point, same place where that loop was in the K. We're going to come around here, cross there, loop back up the top. Remember to keep these 2 strokes parallel to one another and pretty close. And this loop here is fitting into that bottom square 4, okay? And then we have this little vertical stroke in the middle. Most of these, there's a couple exceptions down here, but most of these are going to start with this big open kind of sort of an oval, more circular than oval, but big open loop, okay? And I say big because oftentimes when I think of the letter S, I would think of kind of a smaller loop, something like that. But this is a big loop. And look, we can use those squares again, or not really square, rectangles, to see that this is going to go all the way down to that number 3 line. I guess I should have counted it from the bottom up. We're going to change that. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to go down to the 2. So we're going down here and around, giving it a somewhat straight back before it curves on the bottom. Okay, so look at how big those white spaces are, and really aim for a big open letter there. All right, on to the L's. Again, big open oval there, straight backbone. It's going to come to the bottom, and there's a little flat loop there before it comes up and around and fills in. This is a little bit wider than it needs to be, but I compress that slightly. But we're going to loop back in there in that first square to have a big, lovely, loopy letter L. And I do like to have it kind of tucked back in around on itself. In theory, you could connect to the other letters, but I would not. C. I shared on Instagram that I have an issue with how this word is pronounced, so I'm not going to say that for you all. I'm going to spare you. For the E, we can think about, we're going to have a loop in each one of these sections, okay? And then the other thing we're going to look for is that those loops on the back are not exactly lined, but they're pretty lined up. So that helps us have a letter that doesn't look like it's leaning, but nice and upright. So this is a smaller entry loop. It's not going down to that second line. So we'll have a smaller entry loop. It's going to a little tiny one in the middle and then down on the bottom. So this one is tucked in slightly. It's not a perfect line up like that, but it still looks nice and upright. T's are so fun. These are ones I often have to remind myself, like, wait, how does French cursive do their T's? It's just a little bit different. But I, again, really, really think it's just classy and kind of makes me happy. So it's going to start with a little turn And it's going to dip below that third line just a little bit so you can come back around and do kind of like a C shape to that one before we fill in that bottom section there. So I'm going to give you guys two variations of the letter Z. This is not the one that I use very often myself, but it's kind of neat looking. So we'll go ahead and learn it. What I'm going to point out, though, is that this line in the middle is slightly curved. It's not straight up and down. So we'll start with the top, not totally dissimilar to what we did in that first section where it's coming up and bouncing up along that top line with a slight curve here before we do 2 loops on the bottom, and we will cross the Z there. Okay, this one to me, maybe I overemphasized that diagonal there. It doesn't need to be quite so slanted. Be a little bit more upright. And this last word, gallery, going to be similar to our letter C, but we're going to add that stem to it. So big open loop that's going down to that second section, an upright C shape. We'll stop here, and then we're going straight down on the 90 degrees before completing that. All right, so this next section, you can guess they all have this entry in common with one another, so that makes them pretty easy to do. We're going to see that for all of these, that loop is going to fill in this second section, and that we've got these really strong, relatively straight sections in our letters. So we're really going to be emphasizing that uprightness in our letters. You will also see, if you've got maybe a magnifying glass, I could have made them a little larger. There's some little dots on some of these, and that's to indicate a pen lift. Okay, so we talked about when we are going to lift our pens a little bit in our first part of this class, but French cursive does utilize pen lifts. No one is going to whack some knuckles if you lift your pen off the paper. It is completely acceptable. So for our letter U, the pen lift would look like this. We're going to go down, that little cup shape, up to the third line, down, keeping these strokes all parallel to one another, having a nice rounded base, and then I'm going to lift my pen there so I can do a nice strong stroke down and back up. The W is going to be very similar. We're going to do that nice loop, down, up, lift here. So we're going to go basically similar to the U, but then we're going to continue up. Oops, that was really wide. And out there. So this V is basically going to be this first section of the U and the last section of the W. So we'll just do it real fast. Around, tuck in just slightly and come on out. And the Y, you guys have got this by now. Totally knocking it out of the park with these beautiful letters. This next section is going to have the kind of the S curve base to it, okay? And it is important to pay attention to the size of these bowls of our letters, especially that P. For me, this looks really, really small compared to what I'm used to seeing. And yet when I see it written in a word, I'm like, oh yeah, of course, that looks so elegant and so French. So these small little details really help the letters to stand out quite a bit. So we're going to do that stem where it starts up here, that third line, comes straight down along the slant with a little curved base. You'll notice all of these are coming down to that second line. So we're going to start there, come up and around, and stop in that top section for the letter P. So it's going to be a relatively small bowl for the letter P. The B and the R are going to be kind of basically right in the middle of that stem stroke. So we do the same stem stroke, a little curve at the top, little curve at the bottom, that rounded section here. We're going to aim for the middle of the stroke this time with a little loop in the middle that comes back around. All right, R is similar to the B, where we're going to be starting exactly the same as we start the B. That loop that's coming down here, going to come to the middle. And here's where we're going to branch out, and it's coming straight down. The F, I love that the French cursive F has this slanted crossbar. It just adds that, like, I don't know, it just looks beautiful. And it's one of these, it just seems very fitting for the French style. And I love it because I don't see it in the other forms that I do. So we're going to start with that same kind of S curve stem here. Nice curved base. It's going to come up to the top, dips down just a little bit, and then back up again. I probably made that a little bit longer than it needed to be, but you get the idea where there's a little bit of a dip in that section there. And then we're going to do our crossbar so that it goes right in that middle section of the F. So it comes up in a diagonal, loops, and then comes down. Kind of a close-up of that crossbar of the F. Our D's, so what we're going to pay attention to is that is still going to come down here. So when we go, it's all done in one stroke. It's got that flattened oval on the bottom. Going to come around, and I'm aiming for tucking that in right there. The O and the Q, okay, these ones, I think someone called them lollipops in our last class, if I remember correctly. They do look, to me, a little bit loopier than I would probably actually use. Same with the Q. You could come around and stop there and then have that nice straight backbone to it. All right, so let's look at these numbers, and we will see why this could be confusing. I'm sure you guys could guess why that number 4 could be read as a 6, right? So these are the forms that I would use if I was going to do a formal envelope or a date on some, beautiful document. So these ones, I just feel like have a little more structure to them, but this is going to be more informal version if you want to just use it in your everyday writing. So I give you both options there. For the letter number 1, you have that little curved entry straight down. I'll just call out the parts that to me make it, I don't want to say just French because it's not truly just French, but that little elegance. So this 2, to me, that little elegance comes in this little bump on the bottom. For the 3, it's this tiny, where most of this isn't really curved. Well, it is obviously curved, but not overly curved, but it's that little tiny oval in the middle. In this 4, I love that this backstroke is a little bit shorter. And again, like with the 2, you've got this little graceful wave to it. You have that same graceful wave, more of a dip in the top of the 5. These little nuances. 6 is a little bit more, I guess, what I would consider a standard 6. 7 has a little, you start with this straight line down, little wave to the top before it comes across. And the 8s in this style, I actually do them as 2 separate strokes. And I think I saw, Yuri, did you call out that curved 9 to it? I'm trying to sort of keep my eye on, yes, the curves at the bottom there. So Yuri's right. So we've got that little curve there. Yeah, and same with both the informal and informal. With the 4 here, that's kind of how that's done. It's one full stroke. And you could sort of see how that's a 4, but it is also very confusing for us to be like, is that a 6? Is that a 4? So just be aware that there's some confusion there. And what I'm going to have you guys do here is we're going to play with a few variations as you get into I use the word cadence because it really is. It takes me a minute or two when I sit down to write in a style. I kind of first I'm overly focused on form and, am I doing it right? And then I remember to take a deep breath and to enjoy the writing process. And there's something that happens in that moment where the rhythm of writing kicks in. And for me, with French cursive, because there are these little pen lifts that happen every once in a while, and go back to part 1 if you don't know what I'm talking about, it helps to kind of add this rhythm of writing. But the other thing that you can play with is how close together or spaced apart our letters are in a word, where I'm going to write slow first. So words, so innocent and powerless is where I'm starting. And it's going to be slow. If you've just now seen some of these new letter forms for the first time, you might have to, look at that exemplar again and be like, hey, wait, how do I do that? Which is fine. So words, so innocent. Really like these quotes. So right now I'm writing quite slowly. Okay. And then I'm going to speed up for the words and powerless. Let's see how that is going a little bit too fast now for me to be thinking about really good form and cadence. And then I'm gonna be like, okay, take that breath. It doesn't need to be super slow, but just find the rhythm of those pen lifts. And that's where I feel like the magic of any writing style happens for me, is I kind of really enjoy when I get into the hang of where those pen lifts are happening. And I feel like I start to like my letters a lot more in that perfect speed there. Okay. So that's with speed. Now let me talk a little bit about spacing. So this next section here, so I'll write the word dictionary, and I'm going to compress those words together. I'm still doing the same forms, still the same proportions, but I'm going to have the connecting strokes in between be more compressed. So let's compress it, dictionary. Okay. Until next class and next series, I wish you guys all a beautiful rest of your week, and we'll see you next time. Bye.